Hi, I'm Andy, aka googleman, and today we're talking about running assessments and exams using Google.
Look, up in the sky, it's a bird.
It's a plane!
It's googleman. Hi again everyone, and welcome back to aka googleman. It has been such a long time since I've posted a video here. I really hope you're all safe and well. Like I said, we're going to be talking about online assessments and exams in this video. Now, as we move forward into the new half term, hopefully reinvigorated from our half term break, we will be thinking about potential mock exams for the exam years 11 and 13. Despite the fact that the main exams have been cancelled, we may need some kind of evidence to help us along our way, and obviously any other assessments for any other classes that we might teach as well that we want to run, particularly those in exam classes, GCSE classes, AS level classes, A level classes. Okay. And what I want to do is kind of show you 3 suggestions of how you can use Google to run this digitally, because let's face it, as better as things are getting, we're still going to have instances of self-isolations, students going off ill and things like that. So we need to have this contingency in place. And each one of these suggestions are, different levels of workload, different levels of control for the teacher, and which one you choose perhaps to use will be based on, your department, the number of staff, the type of paper you're using, and all sorts of things. You'll be able to make a judgment on all of these things yourselves. So here we go. Without any further ado, let's jump into it. So the first way I'm going to show you in this video is a very, very simple one, and this is by far the least workload heavy. Okay, this involves setting a simple assignment in Google Classroom, and all you will do with that is if you're using any kind of paper yourself, so you might have made one yourself, or you may be using a past paper. In the examples here, I'm going to be using just an Eduqas Music GCSE sample assessment paper. It's available on their website. I will link it for you below, just if you want to use it to try things out with. Okay, and the simplest way to do that is to, with a PDF or a document that the students don't edit, is you upload that to an assignment in Google Classroom. The students are then told there's a deadline time, which obviously you can put as the due date and time on the assignment, and they then write the exam on just normal paper at home, and then they will either take photographs of their paper or scan it. Okay, I've had students using scanning apps before now as well. It works really well. I'll put a link to my preferred one in iOS down below for you if you want to try that one out. It is completely free. And then they will upload that to the assignment and then click on hand in. Now obviously what this means is that you'll get access to their photos, you'll get to see when it's handed in, because you'll be able to see that history there, but it can be a little bit more cumbersome to mark because you're dealing with pictures and scans and things like that. But in terms of workload in setting it up, it is by far the easiest, and that's suggestion number 1, really quick and really easy. Suggestion number 2 is similar to the first, but offers you a little bit more control and a little bit more oversight. With this, you would put a PDF of your exam paper up. Perhaps if this is a class assessment, you wouldn't do this. I'm coming at this from very much a mock exam perspective, okay? But you might be doing it just from a classroom assessment. If you're doing it as a mock exam, you would give them the paper or part of the paper or whatever you're doing, and upload that to a Google Classroom assignment, okay? And then on top of that, you would give them a template document that perhaps has all the questions in, or is just got the title of the paper. If you're doing it as a class assessment, you may only have 1 or 2 questions, and that's really, really easy for you to create. Okay. Once it's in there, you make sure that you go to the drop down and select make a copy for each student, and obviously you do have to make sure that all of your students are members of that Google Classroom group. Okay. Now what that means is every student has a named copy of the template where they're going to write their answers, which is really, really handy when you're looking for things. Okay, because if you go in through Google Drive, it's named for you, because you can obviously access all of that through Google Drive as well as Classroom. What it also means is that when you're going into the document, okay, it's really easy for them to access it and to type into, but also you have access to their version history. So if you have set them a deadline and they've clicked hand in and they've handed in on time, they could still perhaps sneak in and add some extra things to their answers. They may look things up and go later, particularly, if you're not marking them immediately. If you've got, a couple of hundred papers to mark, if you're a core teacher, your department will have a lot to go through. So you might not get to them on that day. In fact, it's highly unlikely. And in that time, the students could go back and have a look. So this is where you would use version history to go into an individual student's document and just double check. If you're marking it already and going into there, it's not a big shift. It's one click. So when you go into it, you go to where it says when it was last saved even. You can see when the last edit was made, and if you want to double check it even further and see how many edits they've made, you can see how far back perhaps you need to ignore within that document. It highlights for you when you go into version history exactly what has been changed, by whom it has been changed as well. So if someone's account has been hacked and someone's been a bit silly, there you will see that change. Okay, so really handy thing to be able to do there, and that is suggestion number 2. And suggestion number 3, the final one for this video. This one is a little bit more workload heavy, okay? It takes a little bit more setting up, but in my opinion, it is the best as it offers the most control over work coming in, and also you can reduce your marking workload in there as well once you set things up properly, okay? And this is by using a Google form. So what you could hopefully see going on around me is me transferring questions from the sample assessment paper into a Google form, and all I'm doing is I'm copying the text from the PDF into each question that I would use in the Google form. Obviously, if there is something that says underline or circle, I'm double checking that and I'm changing that to select. And what I only have to make sure I do there is ensure I choose the right question style. So obviously you have the drop down list on the right hand side there, which lets you choose whether it's a multiple choice, checkbox, short answer, paragraph, whatever it needs to be. And you select the right one for that question and then just let it run. Okay. Now, one of the great things about this here is if it's anything like my paper, there tends to be a few multiple choice questions in there, okay, and even one word answers. And this is where Google Forms can actually do the work for you. So if you tell it what the correct answer is, when the students do that paper, it will get marked automatically. So I set up a paper using an Eduqas past paper a little while ago, and of the 96 marks available, 25 of those were already covered for me by automatic marking of multiple choice questions and one word answers and things like that, and other versions of checkboxes and things like that. It made a massive difference to the potential workload for marking. Well worth doing, okay? What you also need to make sure you do is organize this really well so it's easy for the students to navigate through. Now, I recommend using a section for each question. So at the end of, say, question 1, you would click on Add Section, which will then only have question 1 on the first page, and then the next section doesn't appear until the students have finished that. It's far less visual clutter and far easier for them not to get lost on there as well. What you also want to potentially do, and this is something that I would recommend, is where you have multiple part questions, okay, where you have one question set at the top and then you have individual parts underneath that are separate. So if you've got question 2A, you might have question 2A1, 2A2, 2A3, okay. Now potentially you could set those as separate questions, okay. What I tend to do with that one is I will write the actual question in a text box at the top of where the question is. So it'll say 2A and then the question, and then below that will be the parts of the question. Make sure that in that initial text box you are very explicit with your instructions. As with a couple of the other things as well, it will involve a little bit of training of your students, and even doing the basic suggestions 1 and 2, you will still need a little bit of training to make sure the students hand their work in properly. So it is worth doing. Okay, so that's something I definitely recommend to you. Now, I know what some people might be asking, because I had to ask this question as well. What if they have to draw stuff? Okay, and this happens with me quite a lot. In a music exam, they actually have to write down music that is played to them. Now, obviously, when you're doing a digital exam, that can be quite difficult. Okay, now obviously there are notation softwares out there, there are even free ones on the internet that only take a couple of minutes to sign up to, but actually they are able to listen to that and hear it properly, which actually is kind of cheating because they can just compare the two. All right, so what I would say with that is use either the facility for uploading a picture like you will have done for suggestion 1 back earlier in the video, or use a Google Jamboard. Okay, so what I've actually done, not all of my students have constant access to manuscript music paper at home, and it might be they don't have easy access to maths grid paper. You haven't been able to get to it if you're a maths teacher perhaps. Maths might find Google Forms a bit difficult anyway, to be honest, but what I have done with a Google Jamboard is I've set the background, and hopefully you can see it happening here. If you look, you'll see me changing the background to a screenshot picture of some music, some manuscript paper. Okay, and what that means is that the students are then able to go into the assignment and edit that. And again, what I am doing in the actual Google form is I'm making it explicit where they need to complete that question. And again, in the lead up to this, I'd be telling the students about this and giving them a little bit of training on how this is done. They are then able to kind of download their Jamboard as a PDF. They could just, if you created a Jamboard for each student in that assignment, they could just do it directly on there, or they could save it as an image from within Jamboards and upload that. If you want to see how Jamboards work, I will link to my Jamboards video. It's a fantastic tool, and I've trialed it with some students recently, and it is very, very effective. Okay, really, really worth doing. When it comes to the upload of pictures, when you have them scattered throughout the exam, there are a couple of options for you here. Okay, you can obviously set a question type as file upload, which is fantastic. Okay, really, really good. However, what I would recommend is putting it at the end of the exam, because you could, and this is suggestion 1 for this, you could put it at that point in the paper. Okay, and say, right, to complete and to move on, you have to put your file in here. But the problem here is it might slow them down. They might have an issue with their computer. They'll get stressed about it. But it's better if they've done the work and they've downloaded it somewhere else maybe, and it's there ready to hand in. They know it's done, so that stress is kind of removed. What I have done is I would recommend putting a separate section. So after all the questions are done, my paper, for example, has 8 different questions, so I've got 8 sections going on there, okay, of 8 sections of questions, and I've got a final section after that where I have questions labelled, the particular questions and parts where the file uploads will relate to, and again I've linked that explicitly, I've described it earlier on, okay, and then they can click submit their form and their exam is done. It's all typed on the computer unless they've have done things on paper, and again they can just scan things and upload it there later on. If they're using their phone, they might already have their phone linked to Google Classroom, as a lot of them probably do at the moment, following the kind of previous half term of remote learning. Okay, but definitely going through, keeping a section per question, using text boxes, and using the file uploads and Google Jamboards for anything that requires an image, really, really useful. Okay. The next part of this is really important, and this is why I feel that Google Forms is the way to go with these exams. Now, all of the other ones require a little bit of more moderation, kind of like watching things coming in. Once an assignment is there, you can't stop them handing it in. Yes, you can see when it was handed in late, but you have to check times and go back. So my recommendation is this. In Google Forms, you have the facility to turn off the form from accepting responses. Okay, and this is where it is going to be incredibly powerful. It's very, very simple. It's a single flip switch in Google Forms, but oh, the difference it will make, because what you will do is, say you assign a couple of extra minutes at the end of the normal paper time to allow for technical difficulties, file uploads, things like that. Okay, and obviously as the paper goes on, if you are, say, head of department, you might have pre-arranged for students with technical issues to email you as you go along so you can judge it. Okay, but at the end of that time, you flick that switch, And instead of having to go through version histories as you would in suggestion 2, checking in hand-in times as you would in suggestion 1, the form is switched off. They can't hand it in anymore. And if it's late, it's late. If they haven't done it, they haven't done it. And it seems really, really harsh, but that's what it would be like in a real exam. You know, they hit that final time. If they haven't finished, they haven't finished. Okay? And how you set up your form could dictate that as well. So you might make it so all the questions are required, okay? Or a really good suggestion would be perhaps to make it so they're not required, so that they can continue on through, okay? So they get more of that paper done, they can go back afterwards, okay? That's absolutely fine. You know, you can arrange that yourselves, okay? Personally, I set all questions to required because it means if a student misses something, they might have missed it by accident, actually you're kind of giving them a bit of a nudge, which in the way things are, I think is really, really nice. And if they don't know the answer, again, it's just a communication thing with your students. Tell them to put a 0, tell them to click anything and move on, and then come back later on, okay? Because that's what you would tell them to do in a real exam, is if you don't know the answer, don't spend all of your time on it, move on. I know certainly for my exams, they're timed anyway. I've got a timed CD, so if they don't know the answer, they have to move on, okay? And it's just that communication and that little bit of student training that will help you along there. And that is the end of suggestion 3. Okay guys, so that's it for this video. I really hope it's something that you can take some things out of and use in the coming weeks and months. I know that I am currently going to be I'm currently training students to use Google Forms to do assessments and exams, okay? It's going to be a big part, I think, of our teaching lives, not just this academic year, but I think moving forward as well, okay? So if you in your school have got a different way that you are planning to run assessments and exams using Google and you'd like to share that with us, please do. Drop me a comment below, send me an email, aka.googleman@ewsacademy.org.uk, or go to my website, it is linked down below, and use the contact form there, okay? And offer us these suggestions so we can share this good practice with everybody, okay? Thank you very much for coming. I hope you're all safe. I hope you're all well. I will see you next time. Googleman out.